Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a particular line from Rishi Sunak against Keir Starmer at today's PMQs, where he asked if Labour were going to increase the employers' national insurance contributions. He didn't get an answer, of course, for various reasons, but Starmer said that he stands by the promises in the manifesto. So should we have a look at what exactly the manifesto said, and if there's any room for tax increases that people may have imagined have been ruled out? Because the answer is yes, there is. Labour's hands are not as tied as some people have been reporting. But first, for daily political commentary, please click the subscribe button so you don't miss out. So Rishi Sunak seemed quite keen to talk about the budget today. His line of question was not actually bad. For example, pointing out that Rachel Reeves has said in opposition that changing fiscal rules is fiddling the figures, knowing that she is actually thinking about changing the fiscal rules in the budget. Of course, it's technically true, but all budgets fiddle the figures in some way or other because all budgets are based on massive unknowns, such as what the GDP and debt will be in 5 years' time. But it's a good line of questioning. And I suppose we should expect that Rishi Sunak would be good at questioning because as Prime Minister, he spent way more time asking Keir Starmer questions at PMQs than he did answering them. However, another line of questioning about employers' national insurance contributions. Now, it sounds like a really good line of questioning. It definitely was interesting. Wasn't necessarily the best political line, but like I said, it raises a genuinely interesting question. What exactly have Labour ruled in and out with major taxes? Because it may not be what a lot of people realise. But first, so why didn't I think it was necessarily the best line of questioning? Well, at first sight, it does have all the hallmarks of a good PMQs question. It's probing the gaps in a manifesto promise. It's looking for the loopholes. Starmer did not give a direct answer, so that's always a good sign you've sort of put them on the spot. It's exactly the sort of question that you would ask to put the Prime Minister on the back foot. But in this particular case, there's no real point. Starmer can't reveal the details of the budget ahead of time anyway, so he can easily bat away suggestions of being evasive as just, no, I'm just not allowed to talk about it. Also, Sunak can't catch Starmer out on this one, because if raising employers' national insurance contributions, which is believed to be worth up to an extra £17 billion a year, if it would be a politically damaging thing for Labour to do, then they won't do it if they come to the same conclusion. And if they think they can get away with it, they absolutely will do it. It's the sort of thing you would ask during a general election campaign, not when nothing can really happen and in a few weeks' time you're going to find out anyway. But people may think that Labour have ruled out raising income tax, national insurance and VAT. So if Starmer insists that the budget will stick to their manifesto promises, as he did state today, then surely this particular tax rise has already been ruled out. Well, maybe not. First of all, it's worth pointing out that ideally Labour would have liked to say they would just reverse the Tories' national insurance cuts from the start of the year. Remember, Labour had already developed spending plans, and then Jeremy Hunt at the start of the year said, oh, we're just going to cut national insurance there. It was a deliberate trap for Labour. Absolutely a trap for Labour. It blew a massive hole in their spending plans to have to commit to keeping it in place. So the motivation to raise the amount back, somewhere else in the tax system, is immense. So switching it to an increase in employers' contributions, if it would make political and economic sense, that is the obvious answer. Now, there will be questions about making sure that small business owners with tight profit margins aren't suddenly landed with unexpected additional expense, throwing them under the bus. You've got to be very careful with things like this. The higher the employers' contributions for anything, whether it be income tax, pensions, whatever, the less likely they are to hire new people, or when they have to, they'll try to keep the wage offer down to compensate, which indirectly does not, of course, help employees. But as with everything in the budget, if the Treasury have been thinking about this, they'll have carried out a detailed assessment of the economic risks and rewards, and Rees advisors will have done the same with political risks and rewards. Hopefully not the same ones who came up with the winter fuel payment policy. But can Labour even do this if they've ruled out increasing national insurance? Well, let's go to the specific wording in the manifesto. I always say a manifesto is full of literary traps for the unwary. Always take all political statements at strictly face value. Read no more or no less into the specific words used, otherwise you will be led astray. So Labour's manifesto says, and I quote exactly, of course, "We will ensure taxes on working people are kept as low as possible. Labour will not increase taxes on working people, which is why we will not increase national insurance, the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax, or VAT. So out of those three, only VAT seems clear. Raising employer national insurance might sound a bit iffy, but the emphasis on taxes for working people does give them cover. Employers, after all, yes, of course they work, well, most of them, but they're not classed as working people. That refers specifically to employees, people who have wages. In fact, Labour actually defined the term themselves during the election specifically as people, employees on low to middle incomes. It also needn't be the case that Labour, if they do go ahead with this, and the Institute for Fiscal Studies has recently recommended it, they don't necessarily have to go for the full amount. But both Starmer and Reeves have both indicated that the money for filling in the Tory £22 billion black hole is not going to come from public spending cuts or from borrowing, meaning that unannounced tax rises will plug the gap. And of course, expect Labour to keep pointing out that they're doing this to fill in the financial hole that the Tories hid from the public. And of course, I mean, whether that will work is another matter. And of course, once that hole has been plugged, well, those tax rises can stay in place, at which point, forever after, they can be used to fund more investment. But there's something else worth looking at as well. Now, maybe Labour weren't actually trying to be too cunning with their wording on the taxes in the manifesto. Who knows? Maybe they actually have no intention of raising employer national insurance contributions and just strung Sunak along because Starmer's taken the line, well, if I answer this, then I have to answer the next one and so on. So I'm just not going to answer any questions about the budget. But let's say they do. It might then be worth looking at the exact wording for the rest. Because, for example, it says that Labour will not increase the basic, higher or additional rates of income tax. Now, that's a funny way to word it, isn't it? Why not just say we won't increase income tax? Maybe because of that attachment of working people to the tax promises, maybe it was a way of saying, look, no income tax band is going to see an increase, which would be to suggest that the reference to national insurance absolutely only meant employees. And even then, employees on low to middle wages, in theory. There's nothing to stop Labour changing the structure even of employee national insurance contributions, as long as doing so doesn't increase the burden for those on low to middle incomes. And they would still keep their promise. There's a lot of tricksiness you can do when you don't read beyond the literal meaning of words in a political promise. But what about an extra income tax band? Now, the devolved Scottish Parliament has tax raising powers, and there are actually quite a few bands at the low to middle income range compared to England. England just has like 3 bands. But the Scottish government added an extra top rate band earlier this year. Well, now, Labour said they wouldn't increase the rate of the named income tax bands in existence in England. It doesn't strictly promise not to add any new bands, does it? If you read the strict wording in the manifesto, there's nothing to stop them putting in an extra high tax band for, say, I don't know, people on earning £250,000 a year or more, or £500,000 a year, whatever it needs to be. Just as Scotland have done. In fact, you could actually do something at both ends. You could add a top rate of tax for those earning silly money, but you could maybe add an extra lower band in at the other end to reduce the income tax paid on initial earnings above the threshold. You could actually use this to not necessarily raise any extra income tax at all, but have low to middle income earners paying less income tax and shift the burden a little bit to those who earn a lot. There's actually so many possibilities. Not that any government can just take full advantage of hidden. You can't just pepper your manifesto with loopholes and then deliberately take full advantage of every single one, because you've got to be careful not to be seen by your core voters as having conned them with tricksy language, or they won't trust your next manifesto. They'll just think it's full of similar literary landmines. But catching out those who weren't voting for you anyway, oh yeah, that's totally normal in politics. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, please click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, you can join for memberships. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.